after being quiet for a few months, I got back to my Liminal World project, and today I'm welcoming my new guest. His name is Scott Hamerton. I want to say a few words about Scott. I've known him since I came to Canada, which was 2011. When I entered my new job, I had 78 new people around me, but Scott was very important because he was my team lead. And since then, this last decade, we have been working on and off, not in the same company, not continually, but we were working on and off together. Practically, he taught me everything I needed to know in order to do my job properly. In 2011, I became an immigrant who had to live in a new country, new language, new culture, but I also shifted in my professional sphere. And I was so grateful to have Scott by my side, who would help me in that transition. He was very patient, trustworthy, reliable, and I can say that he's the one to blame that I became a pretty decent data analyst. So today I consider Scott, as well as other team members, other people with whom we were working together, like Adam, Rob, Erin, Getan, Michael, John, Pip, like I consider them as members of my Canadian family, extended Canadian family. So thank you, Scott, for being there for me. That's what we need every time we are transitioning into a new world or new job. People who will be patient with us and who will guide us, who will taught us new skills and who will help us grow. I was lucky to have you, and thank you for being there for me.
I wasn't prepared for that. Thank you for that. That was so kind. Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm feeling all emotional.
Today, we want to hear and learn more about Scott Hamerton. So, Scott, can you please introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm Scott Hamerton. I live in Nova Scotia with my husband, Mel, and our cat, Goldfish. I grew up in Medicine Hat, Alberta. I lived there for, 23 years. So I'm like a prairie kid in that sense. But I moved to Victoria BC in 2005, right around there for school. And I loved it so much, I just stayed until just recently when we moved to Nova Scotia because, well, the simple answer is because we couldn't afford to live in Victoria anymore. It was just too expensive.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me something about your background? I know that you have an older brother. What was like to grow up in Alberta in 80s?
Yeah, so we I grew up on an acreage. So it was me and my brother most of the time. We had a few like neighbor kids, but for the most part, we had to entertain each other, and we didn't always get along. So you're forced to be friends with someone that you're not necessarily, we're brothers. We don't always get along. But I think it was really nice. We had a lot of opportunities as kids that, I didn't realize until I was older. Just things like access to motorcycles being very young. Like I learned to ride a motorcycle when I was about 5 or 6. And that, that's just very lucky. You don't realize until you're older how unusual that is. I was thinking the other day actually about like my dad built us a bunch of playground equipment. So we had like a full big swing set and like a little fort to play in and stuff. I had access to tools when I got older if I wanted to build my own stuff. So like lots of opportunities, but the downside to that is you have to make your own entertainment. You can't just go to, let's go watch a show, let's go hang out with friends. It's like, no, you're stuck in this little acreage and that's what you've got. So, yeah.
But I know that you're very handy. Like you learn a lot of things by living in a house and surrounding with, you had the general store. Your father had a general store. So
yeah, So the general store came up a fair bit later. That wasn't really a childhood thing, but it did that was right around when I ended up moving out is when but I helped my dad, like one summer, basically, we fixed that all up. And that was essentially my summer between university semesters. But just in general, yeah, I learned a ton of like handy skills from my dad. And like some from my mom, from my dad, I learned, a lot of carpentry and like even like basic plumbing and stuff. And he taught me like how to do electrical work. Like their general store, I helped him wire it upstairs. But then from my mom, she taught me how to sew. So it's not like I only got stuff from my dad, but yeah, just a tons of handy skills because there was opportunities for that.
Yeah. Great, because that's I know that I love talking with you about that because it's completely different than the world that I'm coming from. As you just said, I grew up in a capital, in a city where I didn't have time to be alone. I was always outside playing with kids. Like it was always at least 25 people on my birthdays, even weekends, 5, 4. It was always bunch of people around, bunch of kids. So I didn't have actually time. When I think about my childhood, I didn't have time alone. I was always, immersed in something, in any activity. So it's interesting to hear what was happening from in your world.
Yeah. Well, like in our case, if we wanted to see a friend, we had to, go see them. And I remember once when I was, I think 13 or 14, I just rode my bicycle into town and gosh, I don't know. That was probably about a 3 or 4 hour bike ride at the time. It's just because I wanted to go see a friend. And that was the only opportunity I had for that was to actually literally just pedal a bicycle there.
I want to talk about these last 2 years. We all experienced change and we all dealt in a way with it. We found our ways to shift, either professionally. In your case, you just mentioned that you moved to Nova Scotia, and I wanna talk about that. So we were fellow citizens until 4 months ago, and you were practically living 5 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
We were working at the same workplace. You knew one life for, as you say, 2005. So 15, 16 years you spent in Victoria, which is West Coast Canada on Pacific side. And now you are joining us from Nova Scotia, which is East Coast Canada, so completely Atlantic side. It's completely opposite side of this big country.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that. How did this relocation happen?
Well, the relocation was in some ways a bit involuntary. So like I said, we wanted to buy a house and had been for some time, and we were both, working professionals. We made, we don't make a lot of money, but made good money, good enough that realistically we should have been able to buy a house with, 2 people with no kids. And the longer we waited, the more we started to realize that the housing market just was unattainable to us. And it came with this problem of well, originally the conversation was, if we leave, we're going to lose our jobs. And it's okay, maybe I can bring the house price down, say 40%, but am I also going to take a 40% hit to my income? In which case, why do that? There's no benefit at that point other than now I'm somewhere new in the same situation and I don't know anybody. What happened in the case of Nova Scotia was that I realized I could actually keep my job and work remotely. And so I was able to take my current level of income and transplant myself somewhere else. Yeah. And so originally we were looking anywhere sort of in the same area. We wanted to stay on Vancouver Island or to stay in BC, or, the secondary option was we wanted to move to Alberta because that's where my family and whatnot is. But I really didn't want to move back there, if I'm honest. And I didn't want to leave the ocean behind. I really did love the ocean and the trees of BC. And so that was hard just to say well, what if I move to the interior? Maybe there's a lake or something. But yeah, we basically realized that we were sort of creating these artificial barriers in a way where it was we should look, if we're going to leave Victoria, look all across Canada. And so that's what we started doing, was just looking for somewhere to call home, because like we wanted an acreage with like a little garden, and that was essentially like completely, like I said, completely unattainable on Vancouver Island. It's just nowhere within our income.
Prices are here completely crazy. Everybody knows that. And a lot of people here are in the same struggle. I don't want to leave this lifestyle, or everything we have, that smaller community, close community. As you said, ocean, it's in our reach. We just need, 5 minutes drive this way or that way, and you are in beautiful surrounding. But as you say, it's very hard to afford anything. And once you come to a certain age, you want that step. You want to make that step. And it's a very important step in North American culture. Buying your real estate is I don't want to say a must, but it is a cultural thing.
Yeah. Yes, you've mentioned that before. And I realized too that like sometimes when I talk to Mel about it, that it's like, I'll use the phrase, we got a late start in life. Because like I'm 40 now, and we just got our first home, and that's considered like very late in North American culture, like to be buying a house by the time you're 40. Like all my friends who are homeowners, they all basically started in their mid 20s, maybe late 20s kind of thing. So, and yeah, just the idea of not having a house is weird as a North American.
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure. During this last 2 years, knowing that you can work remotely actually gave you the strength or the courage to decide to move. That has to do something with Corona, and Corona time actually played a part in that, in your move. And I want to hear what was it.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of really horrible things that go along with Corona and the pandemic. But in my case, once we started working from home, that actually created an opportunity for us, where it was like, now I could look at basically any house that had good internet. And Canada's a really big place. All of a sudden, whole community started opening up to us. And even with that in mind, we were still originally looking in BC, where it was, we just didn't want to leave BC. We wanted to be close to family. And at some point it was like, well, why not the other coast, right? It has oceans, it has trees. The topic came up of like, if we leave Victoria, we're going to get winter. It doesn't matter where we go. Canada has winter everywhere except Victoria. And so, yeah, that was like, basically because of COVID and because of everybody now working from home, we were given the opportunity to work from home somewhere else.
And keep your job. Keep your job.
I could keep my job, and even just there's now sort of more work from home options for Mel, where it's like, so when we bought this house, we actually had to do it only on my income, because the banks won't give you a loan based on what they think you could make. Like, not even just the idea of working minimum wage. It's like, no, you have to have actually been working. So as soon as you move, like, there goes all your work history, and they don't want to give you any more money. So the fact that I could keep, not just that I could still be employed and working, but working with the same company. And like, that really, like, if it wasn't for COVID, if I had proposed that even, 2 years ago, it would have been more of a struggle. It would have been really hard to convince people like, yes, I can do my job remotely. And COVID proved that many, many people can. And that actually, opened a door for me ultimately, and gave me an opportunity I wasn't expecting.
I want to talk about this change, because you moved, and it's easy to say, we just bought a house, we now have a garden. But I want to break that story into smaller segments, and then talk about each. At least I can see these 3 stages here. When you decided to leave, but before you left, and then what was happening while you were traveling, and then coming to Nova Scotia, because that is the process that anybody can relate. with you, and I will probably be able to relate to you as well. So we have to go back to that time when something or the idea of moving to Nova Scotia just occurred. And I know that jumping into the unknown can be exciting, and it's like, you're becoming courageous, and as you said, the new doors are opening, but that can bring a lot of turmoil, a lot of fear, a lot of not rejection, but also, resistance from your outside world. And I want to know, what was it like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, it's easy to say, oh, a door opened for me, but the truth is, like, it's kind of dark and scary on the other side, right? Like walking through it is something else entirely. And so basically, like early 2021 was when we first seriously considered, like, let's move all the way across the country, because we don't know anybody out here. We don't. All my friends and family are either in Victoria or in Alberta, in various places. Like, they live in essentially like 3 different distinct locations, and that's about it. Well, there's a couple sort of spattered in the middle, but anyway. Yeah, and so, like, and it's, even being out here now, like, at the time I was terrified. It's like, I'm leaving all my friends behind. Like, that was the biggest thing that held me back, was just knowing that I would be leaving my friends behind. And even now, every now and then I get this feeling like, oh, they're not that far away. And I have to remind myself, like, no, they're a plane ride at least. Like, you can't just go drive to visit them. It took us, like 7 days of driving to get here. Like, it's, and so, yeah, even though it became available as an option, we didn't seriously consider it, I would say, until about like February, March. And even then, it was a lot of like, well, should we, shouldn't we? Like, is that a good idea? Will we be okay? What if we move and then realize it was a horrible mistake? Right? Like, at least when you're still near friends and family, you feel like you've got a safety net. Whereas to move that far away, it becomes way more terrifying, because you don't know, like, literally don't know anybody. Like, to the point, we actually had a problem just recently. We went to get our local healthcare, like the Nova Scotia healthcare. And you have to get someone that lives in Nova Scotia to say, yes, we know this person and they live here. And we're like,
and you don't know anybody.
We don't know anybody. We got a realtor to sign off for us, because they're the only one that knows us.
Oh my God.
Like, oh and my so God. Like, when that kind of hits home at a certain point, you realize like it's hard to overcome those fears. And even now, you still, I still get anxiety about it, but it's getting better, But yeah, you're very much just suddenly isolated, and you can see that. That's what's so terrifying, is you can see it coming, and it's going to be that way.
That's why I'm sometimes calling this transition an immigration. When I was setting up this project, I said, for me, this is like immigration. You are in your own country, you speak the same language, but everything else is removed, and you really feel like you're an immigrant in your own country. You're actually going through everything I went through in 2011 when I came to Canada. Like, I was one person and now I'm not. There is no one that can say anything about me. Like, I worked something, but it's like you don't have a past. Like, everything is suddenly erased. And you really feel like, Jesus, like, this is like, am I an empty? Like, what is, how will I fill this void? Like, how will I fill with what? And then you start, building or making those decisions. But it is a scary place. Although people say, oh, you're going for a better, or in this case, oh, you will have your house and now you have that garden and you kept the job. Oh, it's easy. No, it's not. You're actually removing yourself with all the supports. You sometimes you were not aware that a lady from a grocery store, you were relying on her smile, and you were relying on her good morning, and now she's not there. Everybody sees you as if you are a stranger, and you are.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, it's such a weird feeling to, I can look around and the different houses and stuff and talk to people, but like, they have no idea who I am, even though I'm their neighbor, right? Like they've never met me. Like I'm starting to get to know some of our neighbors now. And part of it is like, you know, as much as I got to come here because of COVID, part of it is I can't really go see the neighbors because of COVID. Yeah. So, you know, at the same time, some doors open, some doors close. Like it's harder to get to know people. But like, yeah, you said it perfectly. Like you don't realize that you're relying on like the little things, like, you know, like there's people I feel like I didn't get to say goodbye to properly, like, you know, casual acquaintances, like neighbors and stuff, people that lived in the same apartment building as me, that I never really sat down and said goodbye to them, despite the fact that I'd been their neighbor for 12 years, you know, and like, because you only know them casually. I remember there's one guy that like, I always talked to him sort of outside the building. He did like some of the gardening. And I basically said the goodbye to him while we were leaving. Like I was like in the car driving away, and it was like, hey, I'm glad I finally got you. Goodbye. We're never going to see each other again. Well, maybe not never, but probably never. And so I think like those sorts of sudden cuts from your life you don't expect. And so despite all the preparations, all the planning, it was ultimately, you know, those people, they are your safety net, whether you realize it or not. And then they're all just gone instantly.
You just said that you moved from Alberta to BC in 2004 or 5, and you were also experiencing a huge change. You were removed from your Albertan friends and way of life, and BC brought a lot of different opportunities, chances, but a different life. So can you now, you know, just compare that Scott in 2004 and this one in 2000, who moved in 2021? Because it's in a sense, it's a similar situation.
Yeah, the biggest difference is that back then I ended up really struggling with depression as a result of that move, because I had never really been alone like that. And even though I actually, the first year I stayed there, I was staying with my aunt and uncle, and it's like they're family and you know them, but at the same time, because they live so far away, I never spent like a lot of time with them. And so there's an unexpected kind of distance there. And what ended up happening was like, I was forced to learn to cope with the fact that I was struggling with depression. And it really just came down to the fact that like, I didn't have any friends and I didn't really know anybody. And that was a huge part of it. So when I made this move, I was kind of prepared for that. Like mentally, I knew that was going to be a problem. And so because of that, I'm actually doing a lot better. You know, I knew what it was going to feel like, that some days I'm just going to be sad. Some days my friends won't be here. And as much as I want to, like even my best friend, right? Like he went on a trip recently abroad. I don't want to give too many details about it because that's sort of his business. But he went on a trip abroad, and it was really nice to like see the photos and talk to him and whatnot. But I couldn't be like, oh, hey, you're finally back in town. Let's go get a coffee. Tell me all about your trip. You know, like this is my best friend and I can't connect in that way anymore. And that's like, I knew that those sorts of moments would come up and that they would hurt. But simply knowing that in advance did prepare me more mentally for it. So that's the biggest difference.
Yeah. I know I experienced the same because I was moving a lot in my life. And I know that everything what people felt, like they were upset because I was leaving. I was upset because I was leaving. They were anxious. I was anxious. They felt rejected, like I was abandoning them. I felt as if they were rejecting me. So I think, and later on or previous, I was in the situation when I was staying and others were leaving. So it's hard. Sometimes I feel that we all go through the same emotions. We all go through the same cycles, but in a different way. Sometimes you are the one who is leaving. Sometimes you are the one who is left behind. And the cycles, as you said, of depression, abandonment, anxiety, fear, rejection, are there. And that's the first stage. I would say it's the hardest. It's the hardest because many people feel hold back. I don't want to do this. This is too much. I cannot handle this. It's like just going back and forth, and I feel like I'm betraying people, or I feel that sense of guilt. Now I have to stay here. I know I struggled with that a lot, a lot. Were you in the same shoes?
Yeah, absolutely. It, yeah, like just the general sense of like breaking off from people, and like you said, with them kind of mirroring your emotions, but like the other way. Like you don't, I remember you telling me about that before, like your experiences moving to Canada, and it stuck with me as like, that seems like something that would happen. Like it sounds so simple to say that, but it really was like, I remember thinking like, yeah, that does seem like people would be upset at you for leaving, even though you yourself are upset for leaving. And then that's exactly what happened. You know, some of our friends and whatnot, they weren't as supportive as you would like. And you got to remind yourself it's because they're hurting, you know, and you're afraid and anxious and hurting, and they're afraid and anxious and hurting. And you end up kind of hurting each other more as a result of that.
Yeah. How long have you traveled from West Coast to East Coast? And what did you happen to, I don't know, experience on the road?
So I've done the trip to Alberta many times, probably at least 20 times or so. And so that whole part of the trip, well, like the departure was really crazy because you're trying to get everything squared away, and you're really just like desperately trying to make sure, like, it's not like the big thing I noticed when you do that kind of move is that when you're moving like from one apartment to another inside the same city, you can forget things. You're like, oh, I don't have room in the car for this suitcase. I'll just come back and get it. You can't do that. It's like everything has to go, or it has to stay somewhere, because you're only leaving once. You're not coming back. But so when we finally got out on the road, it really kind of just felt like, oh, I'm just going on vacation. I'm on a trip to go visit my family, because we even had an extra month of rental that we paid for, even though the unit was empty. We were like, well, technically we actually still have a home. If we decide, you know, this isn't for us, and we panic, even though we're already here, we can actually just fly back. And like, oh, it was a mistake. But like, so driving to Alberta and whatnot really felt pretty normal. Saw some friends along the way. We stopped in Edmonton to visit like Mel's family for a couple of days. And then we stopped in like Calgary, visited a friend just real quick, and then stopped in Medicine Hat to visit my family. We stayed there for, I think, 5 days. And then I've never been east of Saskatchewan, basically. And I've only, like, when I was younger, had I ever really gone into Saskatchewan, like as an adult, you know, in 20 years or something, I hadn't actually gone east of Alberta. And so like leaving Medicine Hat and going east instead of turning around and going back west, that was when, you know, the feeling started to actually kind of bubble up, like, no, this is actually happening. We're actually leaving. And so we stopped once in Regina or Saskatoon, whichever one is closer on the highway, and visited Mel's brother, who he didn't live there, but he came down to meet us. And so we visited him for, I don't know, a couple hours. And that was, I remember, like, leaving that was when all of a sudden I was like, and we're still going east. Like, this is now real. This is, and that was a very quiet day in the car kind of thing. Just that feeling of, you know, this is our home now. Like, this car is our house for the next, you know, week or however long it takes us to actually find a house, because we hadn't like purchased anything yet. We hadn't even, because we weren't certain, like we were trying to get a house, but also trying to just get situated. We actually hadn't even lined up a rental or anything. So our plan was we were going to arrive in Halifax and just stay in a hotel for a couple of days or a month or however long it took. And so literally the car was the home. It was, that's where we lived for, you know, like over a month.
That's unique story. And to me, it's like a good documentary movie. And I want to hear more. How did you end up buying your house while being on the road? You know, it's very unique, and I want to hear more details.
Yeah, so like that was really like like really crazy. When I look back, I'm like, that's a terrible idea. I can't believe we did that. But it came sort of out of necessity, because we first wanted to actually move in probably around June, July, but we couldn't because Nova Scotia was actually closed, like to even internal travelers, just, like anywhere, because of COVID, right? So it doesn't matter where you're coming from, they were closed. And so we were watching very close that, like, okay, once they open up, you don't know what's going to happen, right? Or how long they're going to be open. As soon as they open up, or as soon as they announce that it's going to happen, we're going to go to the bank, we're going to get a loan, we're going to put in our notice once we have the mortgage terms, whatever. Like, we're just going to immediately like take off like a race kind of thing. And so our original plan was to leave in September. And so I think July 28th was when they opened it. We went into the bank like that Monday, started talking to them, and that became a whole saga of like, we didn't actually get like mortgage approval notice until September, and that's why we had to push our move date back from September to October. We were like, well, we'll move late October then, which I just remembered I forgot to tell my dad, and our plan was to meet them like part way in like Slocan. And so he messages me one day. He's like, what's this? It's like, I saw your Facebook post, and it's like, are you going to be here in September or not? And it's like, oh, no, I won't be. Yeah. You can probably tell the people you're going to be staying with. Like, yeah, that's fair. I should have. But, you've got so much on your mind because we're trying to buy a house. Like, we lined up a realtor and everything all within that month, and tried to so the process itself of getting the house remotely was both surprisingly easy and, did have tons of challenges. Like the challenges I feel like are pretty obvious to most people, in that you don't get to see it. Like you can see pictures, you can see video.
That's so scary to me. Buying a house that I didn't see, that I didn't feel, that I didn't get chance to, walk through.
And the big one too is like that I came up and I kept thinking, was like, what does it smell like? Because you like, there's no way, like, even in pictures you get an idea at least, like, oh, I like that kitchen, or I don't like that layout or whatever. You can see that, but it's like, maybe it smells like a cow pasture or something outside, like, so you're entirely reliant on your realtor or whoever is local to be doing like these viewings and stuff. And so our realtor was amazing. He was so good. We're actually going to go and meet him for dinner, like, now that COVID's kind of a little less of a concern. But we're going to take him out to dinner as a treat for him, and that's like next Friday. But yeah, he worked so hard for us. Like, so we're 45 minutes outside of Halifax. So anytime we had to do a viewing or anything, he would drive 45 minutes one way, 45 minutes home, just to come and like take some pictures or do a walk around. And he would do like FaceTime calls or Zoom calls, actually. I think it was Mel was setting them up. I'm pretty sure they were Zoom calls. Anyway, so he would do Zoom calls and would be like walking through the house, kind of showing us stuff, and we'd be talking to him, asking questions. And we looked at one house that we quite liked, but then once we actually did a walkthrough on it, realized it would need a lot of work. And it's like, I don't mind buying a project, but not for the price that it was. It was just too high. And so, and he even described it as like, it's like, wow, this is like walking into your grandma's house that hasn't been renovated in 30 years. I was like, okay. And so, but then we found like, this was sort of like the second house we seriously considered. And I like, yeah, he set up for us like all the inspectors, and like we had to pay them all. And so you're constantly juggling like these weird like contacts in a way where it's like, okay, well, I can set up, but I can't make financial decisions for you. Like, that's what he would say, right? Like, he would set it up for us. Like, he'd set up an appointment, but he can't make a financial decision. So as soon as like the water inspector for the well is in there, he's like, well, he's got to call me. And so I talked to him like, well, do you want to do a full inspection? Do you want a radon gas inspection? Do you want all these things? And so like, we're trying to do that. And then he'd have to relay it to Charlie, who would actually be on site. And so you're trying to like play, phone tag with all three people with a huge time zone difference. Yeah. So like you know, we're kind of experiencing right now is like there's a 4-hour time zone difference. So, you know, people generally like to try and do, especially if you're doing something like for like a house inspection, you kind of want to get it done in the morning.
In the morning, yeah.
But even 10 a.m. here is 6 a.m. back in Victoria.
Yeah.
And so that part, like the time zones was crazy, because like he'd be going out to do stuff, or we'd be like trying to do a Zoom call or something with him. And I know Mel, like him being a baker was very much a blessing. He's used to being up at, you know, 5 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever. And so he would do that. You know, we'd get a call at like 4 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever. And we would record, basically we recorded a ton of videos and stuff whenever they were available. And we would look at them later. And
you could make a good documentary movie out of that. How I bought my house, my first house. Oh. Because for me, that process was very emotional. And I remember going through tons of data, tons of, I'm in an apartment, so strata minutes, I was reading, especially I was very emotional when we had that first inspection and when I heard about possible problems and, you know, how can we predict where we will be next 3 years or 5? Can we afford that? So it was a lot you have to really take in, digest, and make decision. And sometimes it's very fast. You need to, you know, come up in the next day.
Yeah.
So doing that while you're driving and you don't know, you know, where are you heading? Plus, you have to, at least, you know, a bit enjoy in what you're experiencing currently. I would be messed. I would be, oh, Jesus.
I remember like a fun conversation with the lawyers where they're like, well, we'll need you to sign some documents potentially. And it's like, well, we have all of our computer stuff in the trunk. I've got a printer scanner combo. Like we had plans to like potentially just like pull over on like the side of a road, set up a computer and like print off legal documents and sign them so we could send them back. It ended up not needing to happen, but it was considered. Like you might need to, like in the middle of Ontario somewhere, which is all just rocks and trees, you might have to, you know, find a way to get these documents to your lawyer.
But thank God we are in 21st century.
Right.
Thank God, because it is possible. It is, you know, it's a lot of hassle, but it's still, it's possible. I never traveled on East Coast Canada or North Central. So I want to know, how did it go for you? What made the biggest impression on you?
So, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but I'll get to that. It's the biggest impression by far was traveling through Quebec. But in general, so there's like comedy songs and stuff out there about how like middle Canada is just rocks and trees. And it's just huge. Like I remember being like, wow, this is really just rocks and trees for like literally days of driving, like 20 straight hours of driving, and all you see is like rocks and trees. And it's like, you know, in a way you're kind of prepared for it. But on the plus side, we got to see a moose. And so that was very exciting.
Nice.
I feel like we won't have like properly driven across Canada if we don't see a moose. And then, because you see in signs all the way along, you know, beware of moose, beware of moose. And then we got to see one. Yeah, it was, honestly, I'm so glad I did it. We were just talking about it the other day that I'm so glad I did it. Like I probably, like just the drive alone kind of makes it worth it. It was such a beautiful journey in that sense. And like, the only thing I would have changed was I would have done it like slower. If I could have had like another week to actually properly stop some places and really get to enjoy them. Like I never actually really got to go down into Toronto, into like Southern Ontario. I got a bunch of friends there. I would have liked to visit there. I would have liked to have stopped in like some of the like touristy like lakes and stuff and the hiking trails in like, you know, what is actually available in Western Ontario and in Manitoba. And for the most part, we didn't really stop anywhere until we hit, we stopped in Ottawa for a couple of days and got to see like Parliament Hill and stuff like that. Capitol Hill? No, that's in the US.
Parliament.
And then we stopped in Montreal for 2 days and I got to visit an old high school friend. And then obviously the ones back west that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, those were like the two major stops that we actually got to stop somewhere. And I really wish we could have stopped somewhere, like some more places longer, because my dad has done the trip quite a few times. Well, I shouldn't say quite a few, more than once. And he had like tons of places that he knew of. He's like, oh, there's this great hiking trail here. There's some neat waterfalls there. And it's like, yeah, but it's, 8 p.m. and I've been driving all day and tomorrow we're leaving. Yeah. So I'm not going to get a chance,
Maybe you will go back now when you are on East Coast. It's easier. But what about Quebec?
So the Quebec thing was like, this is becomes quite a long story in a way, but like growing up in Alberta, there's a very like anti-Eastern sentiment. Well, it's probably better now. Like I haven't lived there in a long time, so I can only speak to my childhood. But like, and this is interesting. So I stopped and visited my friend in Montreal, and him and I were actually talking about this, that like we took chapters in school in like social studies about like the concept of Western alienation and how like Eastern Canada doesn't like Western Canada. And you don't realize at the time that like, while you do feel alienated, a big part of it is actually just kind of indoctrination. They're priming you to feel that way. And what happened to me when I went to Quebec is like, we had a lot of fears. It's like, well, neither Mel nor I speak French. What happens if we have to ask for directions and we find someone who doesn't speak English? We only speak English. We're those people. We learned English like in our childhood. We never needed another language. We don't speak any other languages. And so we were quite concerned about that. What ended up happening was that like everywhere we went, either everyone spoke English or even like the important stuff was all in English anyway. So like road signs for the most part had English as well, or it didn't matter. Like a stop sign might just have the French on it. And so like, you're not like that worried about it. There was one incident with a road sign that their merge signs look different. And that's a heck of a thing to get wrong at highway speeds. That would lead to a very scary incident of almost getting run over by a big truck. But like, what it made me realize was that as much as I could then travel through Quebec and like I could order ice cream at a mall, I could wander around and talk to people, and even the people that didn't speak like strong English, there was still an ability to get by and we could communicate. Whereas like, I honestly can't say that like, if somebody from Quebec were to travel through Alberta to BC and their car broke down on the side of the road, like, I don't know how long it would take for someone to come along that could actually speak French to them. Or if they called a tow truck, would anybody in the trucking agency be able to talk to them at all? And I didn't have that fear at all after driving through there. It was like, if our car breaks down, I'm going to be fine. Like everybody here basically speaks English, or they're going to find someone who speaks English in a matter of seconds. And that was a very eye-opening experience to me, where I realized that like, I felt like I'm actually kind of an incomplete Canadian because I can only talk to some of the people in my country. I can't talk to all of them. And that hit me way harder than I expected. And that's just from like, hanging out there for like 2 days. It was this instantaneous realization of like, I haven't been the best countryman to some of these people. And so, yeah, that was a big realization, to particularly how the West treats Quebec and the East, and how much animosity is there that's just totally unwarranted. So, and I know we've talked about this before, that like, it's not like there's no French speaking people out West, and it's not like they're hated or anything. There's just, the big thing to me is it really feels like Quebec is doing their part to try and provide English to English Canada. And I really feel like Western Canada isn't doing their part to provide French to Eastern Canada. And that in a way locks them into their own province. And I don't like that.
Yeah. It was interesting for me to hear your story, because I was struggling with that when I was moving, when I decided to move to Canada. I knew that I'm going to BC, where people are speaking English, but I was afraid. Like I haven't learned French. We learned some German language in my elementary and high school, but no French. And I was like, Canada is bilingual, and how will I manage? I'm struggling with English, let alone French, that I don't know a word of. And when I came, I felt at ease, like, okay, it's only English, so I will make it. But now what I see in BC, I have a small kid, And I told you that there is a lot of French immersion. There is a lot, pretty much every school, and people are interested. People want their kid either early immersion or late. They want them to speak French. They want them to speak the second Canadian language. Whereas I didn't made a decision for my kid because she already speaks another language at home. And I was struggling like, no, she needs to find her footing in English before she can move on the third language. Whereas in your case, you know, and what I want, it's happening. Like the West Coast is catching that train, but with this new generation, I would say, I don't know, I don't have the perspective, I'm new, but I'm guessing that it's more of French now on West Coast than it was when you were growing up.
I do agree. Like I can't see it being worse.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like it would be hard to be worse. Like the big thing too is like that sort of like acceptance and more of a teamwork type mentality and just acceptance is why I ultimately wanted to stay in BC over Alberta. Was I felt that BC was just more accepting to just different people, you know.
I was happy when you said that maybe you will take French classes.
Yeah. We still have plans. We want to take a French class of some kind. Where the trouble we're facing right now is a lot of stuff is like closed down just because of COVID still. And so it might have to wait a year or two.
No,
you know,
but it's there.
Yeah, it's on the list for sure. And I very much want to at least be able to like, because the one I remember is trying to order ice cream in Montreal. And like the guy serving us, like he didn't speak hardly any English. And so, you know, there's a lot of pointing and like, you know, he's asking what size cup and you're miming everything. And I'm like, at least if I could just order ice cream, you know, like I don't need to be perfectly fluent, but I at least want to be forward enough that he's not trying to serve, like he's already working retail. Those are horrible jobs usually, right? At least make his life a little bit easier and be able to speak his own language.
Yeah. Before I ask you something, I just want to mention, it's the same for me. When I came to Canada, I speak another language, and there was a lot of pointing out. It's like, oh, there is that frustration. I want to say, but the words that are coming out are in my language, and I'm supposed to say. And part of me thinks that I'm saying in English, but I'm not. It's really hard. But I always say I don't want to lose my accent when I speak English, because that's a sign that I'm actually speaking another language. And with that language, I'm bringing another culture on the table. And once you hear whatever, like, I don't feel this, you know, uncomfortable anymore, because I'm saying, no, that's a good thing. I'm bringing another culture. Maybe you are not realizing that, but I know. So I want to speak better English, but I don't want to lose my accent. So in your case, it's I don't want to say it's the same, but it's similar. I feel like your sense of identity has expanded or has changed while you were in this transition, because what it means to be Canadian for you now.
Yeah, like that absolutely happened, where my identity before was like, you know, part of it was just being like, oh, I'm a prairie kid, you know, that's part of my identity. Oh, I now live in Victoria, BC, you know, I'm a West Coaster, that's kind of part of your identity. And like, that's your Canadian identity in a way, or well, mine, not realizing that there's actually like a lot more to Canada. And like, you can read about it in a textbook, you hear about it online, you talk to people, you don't necessarily experience it. And that was what happened to me, was that all of a sudden, like my identity got attacked, but like in a good way. It made me question things that I just kind of took for granted and had always been part of who I was. And all of a sudden I was like, I need to be a different person. I need to, and not, like I said, not in a bad way, but I need to, like, I always consider myself like fairly accommodating to other people. I try to be supportive. And I realized like in this one particular way, I hadn't been as supportive as I should have been. And so that very much like changed that part of my identity, that it was like, I'm an incomplete Canadian, as I kind of realized was like, you know, the fact that you can get like political minutes and stuff like that from the government, they're, you know, like all of our acts and everything, they're all in French and English. And like, I can only read one of them, you know? And it's like, I had that question of like, can I really call myself Canadian? Because I don't speak French. You know, we are officially bilingual, but I'm not. And that was a bit of a hard realization.
I want to move to Nova Scotia now and talk a little bit about what is happening and what your new start look like. So how did this, like, you said there is a lot of still restrictions because of Corona, so you couldn't start building your community. But what is happening for you now in Nova Scotia?
So, well, if we go back a little bit, like when we first got here, we arrived in November. Yeah, because we left late October, arrived early November, and we at the time had an offer on a house, and we were like trying to finalize everything, but we ended up staying in a hotel for 10 days basically. And now every time we drive by it on the highway, go, oh, there's our first home in Halifax, right? Because that was where we lived for 10 days. And so like back then, we were mostly concerned with just like, where can I buy groceries? You know, where like, and kind of the weird realization that you and I have talked about this before of like, what brands do I buy? Like they have some different brands out here. There's different stores out here. And like, yeah, it's still Canada, but you don't realize like who sells cheese that I like. You don't expect that to be a difficult question to answer until you.
Where to go for a coffee?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like because like in Canada, like Tim Hortons is way bigger in Eastern Canada than it is in Western Canada. Like it's huge out here. We drove past, this is a little bit off topic, but we drove past one just the other day that had like, I don't know, probably about 40 or 50 cars lined up. Like it's like a high, and it was just the drive-through for a Tim Hortons. I was just stunned. But, you know, so there's like little cultural things like that you don't expect. And so like now what we're doing is like, we're kind of trying to get to know our neighbors a little bit. We're trying to plan for like the spring, like once the weather gets nice and we can travel around a bit. Like we could travel now, it's just crummy. But yeah, so we have a lot of plans in that sense of like, what are we going to do in the spring? Because like a big one is our garden, right? We really want a garden. We now finally have that opportunity, and so we're trying to secure that. And like, you know, where are we going to put it? What are we going to grow? What are we going to do for the first year? Where are we going to store, you know, the harvest kind of thing? Well, at the same time, trying to, you know, integrate a bit with the people that are around us now. We went to, you know, the liquor store, the local liquor store for the first time the other day. You know, just talk to the cashier lady there, you know, like, oh yeah, we're new here. And I remember like when we first moved in, there's like a little local hardware store. And almost immediately we were talking to the one fella there, and he says, he's like, oh, are you like new here? And I was like, oh yeah, we just bought the house up on, you know, Highway 354. And he's like, oh, I know that. And he immediately launches into like the history of the house, where it's like, and it was like, he knew who lived there, what had happened to it, like all the previous owners, like when it sold, and like that's kind of what I was hoping for in a way, is to be able to meet more people like that and get to know them. And so we're still battling that a little bit, just because it's not easy to, you know, walk over to someone's house and just say hi, especially like I'm very much like you know, pro vaccines and whatnot, and wear masks and all that. But that, just saying that becomes kind of a political statement these days. And if I walk up to someone's house with a plate of cookies and a mask, it sends two statements at the same time. And
keep away. Like that. Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're at, is just to try and, you know, get to know the community. That's
every new start is hard. At least it was for me. And when I look back, I can say that I needed always at least a year to feel at ease. like a year to find my coffee shop, brands that I want to eat, that I love to eat. I struggled with that when I came to Canada. I couldn't eat all the meat or all the pasta, like cheese was a huge thing for me. So, and I had health problems when I came. So I really know what you're talking. Plus, you need to buy things, you know, where do I buy a pillow? How can I get a cutlery? You know, and sometimes it's just like there is a lot of frustration, like everything has to, like, I remember having a list with the things that I'm supposed to do in next week, and sometimes I would need a month to do all those things.
We have a list. Yes.
You go step by step and you think, I will never make it. And you are alone, you feel lonely, you feel a lot of frustration, you're losing a lot of time on the things you shouldn't be losing. Like, oh God, it's just the coffee, but no, now you have to find that place.
Yeah, because you don't realize like how much, like, so we mostly drink like instant coffee. Like I'm not a coffee person for the most part, but I like instant coffee. But even that, like the stores we shop at out here don't have like the brands we're familiar with. And it's amazing how like little things can start to frustrate you in ways you didn't expect. Like the one brand we bought back home, the containers were big enough that you could just like put a spoon inside it, and that could just be the spoon for the coffee. And the containers for the ones out here, it like doesn't fit. And it's amazing how much like those little things just kind of
muscle memory is there. Muscle memory is there, but
yeah, and it wears on you in a way, like when it's all those little things that are just a little different, just not quite right. And some days you just feel, like you said, super frustrated, like
exhausted, sometimes exhausted.
Yeah, you don't realize how much familiarity you need in your life to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Until you don't have it.
Yeah. When you are an immigrant, but like a real immigrant, usually you have people who will, you know, from your country who will tell you, you know, that street Shelbourne, you go to that deli and they have whatever, pretzels, that pasta. So usually people are getting the map. Like these are the things where you buy or ask for that person, and then they will show you the way. But that's the benefit when you are an immigrant, because once you know you just need one person, and they will trace you. You know, this is the hairdresser. This is the place where you order a meat for, you know, any occasion like Christmas or Easter. So that's the benefit. Whereas you are now an immigrant in your own country, so you are actually alone on your own. So you have to deal, and I would suggest you to have a list. Small, like finding out my brand of coffee, or let alone
we have a, like when at first, so we bought like a little board to put on the wall, and like initially, like it was a big list of like things that had to be done for the house, shopping that needed to be done, furniture that needed to be bought. It was just tons of things that were constantly like, you know, it was a huge list. And, you know, over time, we started to whittle them away, which is helpful to keep the anxiety away. You know, like when you're getting something done, even small things, it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable.
There is also one thing I struggled when I was making my big moves. I felt rejected from one world because I was leaving, but I also wasn't accepted. Sorry, I wasn't accepted still in this new. So you were really in limbo. Like, I'm not there because I left, and there is a lot of feelings. So I'm avoiding to look at that place. Whereas here, I didn't make bridges. So you are, in a sense, in between, really in between. And if you don't know how to support yourself emotionally, because you are in between, and you feel it is rejection. These are the closed doors still, and here is the closed door. So I struggled with that. And I would think that nowadays, when we still have a lot of mandates and people can sense that, felt, they can feel rejected. They can feel rejected. I can't get in because they are keeping the distance from me, whereas I can't go back because it's a closed door. So what is like to be in that space, and how to support yourself while everybody else are struggling, but you as well. So did you have those feelings?
Yeah, and at first, absolutely. Like when we were first out here, and especially when you don't know anybody, right? And there's very much a feeling like, well, if I go home now, I'm giving up, right? And people are going to judge me for that. Especially like you end up with kind of some awkward conversations, particularly when you tell someone that like earnestly, I'm leaving, I'm going to move to Nova Scotia. Like I remember, like you and I kind of talked about this a little bit, like in a totally separate context, about how like you were very supportive, being like, oh, I think this will be like an experience similar to mine, and it very much like I really leaned on sort of your experiences and what I learned from you going into this. But I remember like I had this distinct moment where I was talking, I obviously talked to a bunch of my friends and people about moving, and only one person, like, and it was just kind of this random one-off, but I was just talking to him. He's an old coworker. I hadn't talked to him in like years, and he just happened to say hi to me like on Facebook. And I was talking to him, and he was the only one that like immediately was like, oh, cool, you're moving to the Maritimes. And he was like super supportive about it. And that's because he's from here. Like everybody else really felt like they I don't know, like you said, like sort of a rejection of sorts, like you're not one of us anymore in a way. It's not like that. Like there's obviously still care there. They still care about you. I think that's where those comments come from, is that position of they have feelings for you as a person, and they're upset, they're grieving that you're leaving. And then when I got here, it was very much like, well, I don't know anyone. This is terrifying. Now it's a lot better though. Like we've got to meet the neighbors a tiny bit. And one of the things that like really helped me kind of feel a little bit comfortable was, so it snowed real bad one time, and they get way more snow out here, way more snow. Our neighbor has like a little like kind of dune buggy thing with a plow on the front of it. And he plowed our driveway for us without us like asking or anything. We never even met them in person. And that was immediately like, I now kind of feel like part of a community. I feel like if I had to, I could go over and be like, hey, I need some help, or, do you need anything? Like, there's an immediate connection there. And we'd been here for probably over a month before that happened. So yeah, it was quite a while of, you just feeling like you said, like you're just alone, like you're just completely isolated from both your friends and the local people.
And this is like, you start building the bridge, brick by brick.
Yeah, you're trying to connect with people. The first like person that I really kind of talked to from my neighbors was, I happened to be outside, like at the garbage bins, basically, and on the front, like just in front of the house. And one of my neighbors was walking by from like the community mailbox kind of thing. And I said hi to her and talked to her for about, I don't know, only like 3 or 4 minutes, because it was like -10 out and very wet and very cold.
Yeah.
But just that, to build that first connection, lay that first brick and get
but you have to give them time as well, and they are, I don't want to say they're watching, but it's like, I want to see who you are. I felt the same when I entered our workplace 10 years ago when I came to Canada. It's like
10 years.
Yeah, because you need to, although you want to connect immediately, we need time. You need to, we have to be in a certain situation. So you see how I'm reacting. Can you rely on me? What are your values? Am I on that place? So you need time. So it's not about rejection. It's about that, how they say, dating. You're just dating right now with your community, because and you now are checking out, are you a good fit?
Do I fit? Like that was a big one for sure. Like obviously us, being queer, like we had a lot of concerns about like, well, what if we get a neighbor that like hates gay people? Like, what do we do if we buy a house next to a crazy guy?
Yeah.
And so that was like a legitimate concern of ours. And like you said, you're kind of, you know, do your values align, right? Like, you know, even just talking to somebody, you know, like COVID has become quite political if I go and wear a mask. But like, so the Facebook page for some of the local businesses, like they posted a message basically saying like, it's a, you know, if you don't like masks, too bad. That's just the way it is. It's, you know, a provincial mandate. Please don't take it out on our staff. Like that's not their responsibility. And it got a lot of support from like the rest of the community. And so seeing that was kind of like, oh, these people probably have values similar to mine, at least, you know. And like we were looking at like voting records and stuff before we moved out here. Like, how does this, you know, general county vote usually? Are they super conservative? Are they super left wing? What I learned is, for the most part, Maritimes is very centrist. Pretty much everything's like right down the middle. Yeah. And I'm like, that's good.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You get from both, neither nor.
Yeah.
Neither nor. So you're making that decision in between, like a middle ground, which is good. Yeah. But it's good that you're coming up also with your values. Like, no, I'm not hiding. I'm stepping up and saying who I'm at and letting you decide if I'm the one that can fit you. So I'm not fooling you or faking, I'm not fooling. Yeah. The same is what I'm expecting from you. Yeah. So it's a tough game. It's a tough game because you need somebody and they want to see if you are one of them. It's usually like that. But I love that game because that's how we get to know this. That's how we get to know each other. And that's how we really build connection. Everything else is just faking. But this is like, these are my stuff. And sometimes people who would at first reject you, after a while, they said, no. I usually wouldn't go along with this person. But after a while, it's like, I'm going, I'm not voting, but I'm standing with them because I respect their behavior or their attitude or how they're coming across. So it's a hard game, but it's very rewarding.
Yes.
At the end.
Yeah. Or that's exactly it. It's very rewarding when you start to like just connect with people. Like I've found that like historically I've been able to get along with pretty much anyone as long as they're not like, you know, violent kind of thing, right? Like you can have all kinds of different political views and I'll generally be okay like talking to people. And so I wasn't like too worried about that. It's always that like, you know, the really fringe kind of crazy people that those are the ones I was most concerned about. And so far I haven't met anyone like that, you know. It's all just like normal people living their life kind of thing.
Your journey is not about relocation. If you ask me, what I see, it's about in one moment stopping yourself, making this decision. But in order to move, you had to do the decluttering. You had to get rid of a lot of things. You have to close many doors, then get on that trip. And once you settle, you have to make new decisions. So you're actually creating a new Scott, and I can sense a new energy in you. There is a lot of, we didn't mention, you are a writer as well. So you spend a lot of time alone with your thoughts, with your fiction novels. You wrote 8 or 9
I've got,
And right now I see another Scott who is on the road, who is taking risk, who is choosing new things. Your identity has shifted. So there is a lot of new material for new books, but also there is that empowerment that came with that leap you took. So what are your plans regarding your creativity?
Well, so the big thing I noticed was that like I haven't done a lot of writing in quite a while. I've only recently started to get back into it. And it made me realize how much energy like I put into that and how much energy it takes out of me to do the like take risks and do moves and like buy a house. And now that it's starting to, you know, settle down a bit, I feel comfortable working on it again. And like, yeah, like I think you've actually convinced me, you know, you keep trying to tell me that I should write a screenplay of my trip. And
yes,
I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, yeah, I could actually probably, I did this, I had a conversation with Mel where I was like, there's not enough conflict though. Like there is, you know, like I'm doing the writer thing, there's not enough conflict. And I was like we could like make some up. And like the only one that came to mind is like, I did most of the driving. Mel wanted to do some of the driving, but he wasn't comfortable for most of it for a lot of different reasons, like mostly just being a new driver. And I'm like, I like driving. Like I have no complaints. It was fine. I was like, but you could, if you wanted to embellish the story, make that like a constant point of contention in the story that like, I'm the one that's stuck always driving. And so like, if I really wanted to, like I could tell the story like very literally or embellish it to make just a slightly like a more exciting story, but still the same story of, you know, with the happy ending of moving across the country and whatnot. But yeah, I think you've convinced me that I'll actually give it a go.
A week ago, I was following Victoria Film Festival, which I never miss, and I love documentary movies. And when we were preparing for this video, I was just thinking, like, I would watch this movie. I would choose. You know, how two guys just decided to, you know, move across the country. Canada is huge. You went from, you know, West Coast of North America. This is a continent. On the other side, it's a country, but this is a continent as well. And how did it go? Especially because you took that road first time in your life. And you made, you're, as you said, it's for North American culture, buying that first real estate, it's a big thing. And you're a late bloomer in this case. Yeah. So I would love to hear that story, and I would love to watch, like, your personal thoughts, how you went through those, what Mel thought, how you know, what are the people you encountered. Charlie, is that the name of your... He would be a great addition to this story. So I would love. Think about it.
Like I said, I think you've convinced me. Like I'll probably like take a crack at it, because it's not my normal type. And it's like I don't normally write scripts. I write novels, which are like, there's definitely more of a different talent there. But yeah, like I think you're right. I think actually that would make for an enjoyable story.
Thank you, Scott, for coming today and sharing your story. I wish you all the best with your homemaking, but also with your creative work. I think now when you settle, especially with your garden and everything, end of the year, put your energy into getting your novels out, because I think this is the time, and you already moved one mountain. So this is just another hill that is in front of you, and I know you will make it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure. It was very enjoyable. Thank you.